So when it comes down to all of this, does this mean I just need to cut out all the things that I love and enjoy because everything's more expensive?
I don't ever think, that's never my philosophy, is like, don't do anything fun. If I say like, no, I can never have a donut again, well, now I'm probably taking all the joy out of life. Credit cards, loans, mortgages, they're all tools that can help make our financial life better if they're used wisely.
So Jade, when it comes to inflation,
yeah,
we know we're all living in this state of inflation, right? Gas prices are $5 on average a gallon, which is just
painful, isn't it?
Yeah, it's mind-blowing. And it hurts, right? Food prices are the same. Why, from your perspective, and I know it's probably an economic equation as to why this is happening, but we know interest rates are going to increase too.
Right.
Why are we in this state right now? What's going on?
Okay. Well, maybe I hesitate to let's do a macroeconomic lesson. I mean, nobody wants that.
No, we don't. You're right.
But maybe we can just talk a little bit about what inflation is and maybe some of the causes of it, and then why the interest rates are going up. Maybe we can kind of talk about that a little bit. But the best definition I've ever heard of inflation was, I think it was attributed to Milton Friedman, who was an economist.
Yes.
And the phrase is, it's too many dollars chasing too few goods. So I like to kind of think about that. And if we think about the last couple of years, right, what we've been through, thinking about through the pandemic, it's almost a textbook example of that quote. Too many dollars, an oversupply of dollars. Well, if we think about literally, there have been trillions of dollars, right, pumped into the economy. We got checks directly from the government, right?
Yeah.
And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing doesn't matter. That's not the point. But there has been a lot of money pumped into the economy, and for good reason, because we were in a pandemic and the economy was on the verge of collapse, right?
Right.
So that's where kind of the too many dollars kind of comes into play. And then if we talk about that chasing too few goods, right? 2 years ago, nobody thought about supply chain. What does supply chain mean? Now that's all you hear about is supply chain issues. So, there's a shortage of a lot of things. It's hard to get new cars, right now, it's baby formula, right? Is the latest thing that has a supply issue. So it's kind of that textbook. Here's all the many dollars that have been pumped in, and then because of the pandemic, we've got all these supply chain issues. So there's little goods right on the shelves. That's kind of going to have that effect of that prices are going to raise. Now, there's a lot more things involved in that, but that's maybe just the simplistic way to look at it, and that's why we're seeing prices go up everywhere.
Yeah. So as prices now increase, is it true that bringing up interest rates are going to help drive prices down, or what does that look like? Well,
that's the theory.
Okay.
That's the theory of the Federal Reserve. So the idea, the Federal Reserve can really only do a few different things to try to. It has so many tricks in their bag, right? And one of those is interest rates. So the idea behind that is that if we make money less affordable, make money more expensive, that could have the impact, or this is the idea, right, or the of slowing down spending, slowing down borrowing. And so if we can kind of slow down that too many dollars, right, if we can kind of slow that down a little bit, and maybe at the same time then allowing some of the supply chain to pick back up, then maybe things can come back into balance. So that's the theory. Now, the Fed has a very difficult needle to thread, a real delicate balance there, but that's what the idea is let's kind of slow this down by making money more expensive, in essence.
Okay, interesting. So for all of us that aren't part of the Fed and we just see our prices continually increasing, right? And we're not necessarily getting any additional dollars at this point, right? We're maybe not getting raises, and inflation just continues to increase.
Right.
Does it make sense for us to really utilize, a credit card to help us get through this time? Or is that, maybe not what we should do?
That's a really great question, Kristalina. And I don't think any time is different in that. Make sure we're using credit cards wisely.
Okay.
Maybe now it might be a little bit more important that we are, but that's always, I think, a good financial strategy, is make sure that we're using credit cards wisely. Anytime we're using a credit card, to make a purchase that we can't afford right now, right? What we're doing is we're taking future cash flow or our future budget and we're obligating it, right? Because we're going to have to pay that back. Anytime I'm using a credit card like a debit card, that, okay, I'm putting this on and I know that I'm going to have the ability to pay that off later, that's where some of those strategies can come in, and we'll maybe talk about that later, where some of those strategies can be helpful. But any time that we are putting something on a credit card that, hey, I can't afford this now, but I either need it or I want it now, and so I'm going to put it on the credit card and worry about paying for that later, yeah, we're obligating future income. And if we compound that with what we were just talking about, rates going up, knowing that, okay, well, in the future, that's going to be even more expensive. That decision I'm making to put that charge on my credit card today that I can't pay off, it's going to be even more expensive in the future because rates are going up.
Yeah. So in this environment, making sure that we're even more conscious about the things that we're utilizing our, loans or funds or credit cards or whatever for is important to keep in mind.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that, Kristalina. Okay. It's those concepts, right? Those principles of sound financial management are timeless, regardless of what the economy is doing, what rates are doing. They're kind of those basic things. Sometimes I kind of like to talk about those things as being like diet and exercise. We all know, like, if I want to if I want to lose weight and I want to be healthier, I should eat better and I should exercise, right? And it's kind of the same thing in financial health. Well, I should make sure that I'm on top of my budget and that I'm separating my needs and wants. They're easy things to say and hard things to do, but really that's what the bedrock is. That's timeless because of the things we're talking about right here. Maybe makes them even just a little bit more important.
Okay, yeah. So we're heightening it a little bit. So I will say I've gotten to maybe, I don't know if it's a trap or it's a game for me. I don't know. Where prices are going up. Like when I'm at the pump and I'm filling up, I'm just like, sweet. I'm getting how many more rewards points because I was able to just spend $100 on filling up my car, right? I'm so excited about that. Obviously, right, there's a little bit of that will come, right? We're getting more rewards points. We're doing that with our credit cards maybe that we're utilizing, but tell me a little bit about those strategies that you referred to.
No, that's a great example that you just pointed out there, Kristalina. That's how to use a credit card in a wise manner and use that strategy for your benefit, right? So we have to go back and say, anything I'm putting on my credit card to take full advantage of this strategy is within my budget and things that I know I'm going to be able to pay off. If I'm doing that, now exactly what you say is exactly comes into play. Now I'm earning rewards on stuff that I'm just in my normal everyday spending, maybe more on gas than I was 2 months ago. But as long as I'm making those purchases within my budget and I know those are things that I'm going to pay off, then absolutely that's a great strategy. It's kind of the idea might be, think your credit card is like a debit card, right?
Yeah.
Think like a debit card, but use a credit card. So as long as every time I swipe, I know, yep, this is in my budget. Yes, this is in my budget, just like I would if I were using a debit card.
Yeah.
That strategy, that works.
Okay. Whether I'm swiping or tapping.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
All the things, all the actions that it's so interesting that I do feel like as a society, and I'm curious on your thoughts on this, because I'm not pulling out that cash. Because who has cash anymore, right? I mean, right? We're not counting our bills out as we're purchasing goods as often.
Right.
I feel like there's a little bit of that doesn't seem as real.
Sure. I think you're absolutely right. And I think that makes those foundational principles that we're talking about even more important and even a little bit harder to do, right?
Yeah.
I really have to be on top of that because I'm not making the same type of conscious decision that maybe we were 25 years ago as a society, that I'm parting with that cash and that it's a tangible thing. Yeah, tapping or swiping a card, you're right, isn't really all that tangible, but it's the same concept. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Every time I tap, it's the same thing as handing over cash. And so I agree with you. I think that it just means that those principles are even that much more important because it's so much easier to overspend in today's environment than it was 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned interest rate, right? Obviously, we want to know not only what the introductory offer is, but also the interest rate itself. But then we had already talked about how rates are increasing.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, which I likely am. Once I sign up for a credit card, isn't that kind of like a mortgage and my rate doesn't change? Or am I crazy?
Well, I would never call you crazy, Christina. Never would I even go there. But no, most credit cards, if not the vast majority, almost all credit cards are variable rate.
Okay.
So no, it's not like you when I get that credit card, that is my rate forevermore. Most of them are tied to the prime rate. So they're indexed to that.
What is prime rate?
So the prime rate comes from when we were talking about the Federal Reserve earlier. Yeah. That's kind of what it's an index out there that is widely available, that most institutions, everybody can know what the prime rate is. And so it's widely available, and then there will be a margin or an amount that is added to that prime rate. So when, for example, the Fed changes rates, when they raise rates, in essence what happens is that prime rate is going up. So if I have a card that is, say, prime plus 8%, whatever the prime rate is, add 8% to it, and that's what my rate is. If the prime rate goes up next month, well, I'm that new rate plus 8%.
Okay.
If prime goes up by 0.5%, which it probably will in the next couple of weeks, that means my credit card just went up by 0.5% at the same time.
Let's say I have no idea what prime is. I'm an everyday person. I'm not going to watch what the Fed is putting prime at, right? I really should probably care more than I do. How do I figure out what my interest rate today is?
Well, that's going to be on your statement, on your credit card statement. So that's, and most of your credit cards or your credit unions or whatever will have an app, right? And I can usually find that out just by looking at my, the details of my loan there. So now that's usually going to be expressed in what the rate is right now, what the total rate is, the index plus the margin. But you can find what the prime rate is. Right now it's 4%, just as an example. So, if my card says my rate is 12, well, and I know prime is 4, then I'm plus 8. Okay. So I know that whatever prime does, that I'm going to be 8% above that. So it's going to be on your statement. The prime rate's easy to find. That's Google answers everything. What's the prime rate? You can find that if you really want to know what the prime rate is.
Okay, awesome. But really just paying attention to our statement. Maybe I need to read the fine print more.
Yeah. Well, and I think that we should be paying attention to our statements anyway. People don't really do that either, but that's a place where you find out if you've had fraudulent charges and things like that too, is paying attention to your statement. So there's your rate, and there's other benefits too to making sure that we're watching that credit card statement. Okay.
In all your years of working in the financial industry, which it's been a while, right?
Yeah, I'm getting up there, Kristalina.
Getting up there. What would you say is the number one piece of advice that you would have when it comes to utilizing a credit card or just lending in general?
I really think that any credit card or lending in general should be looked at as a financial tool.
Okay.
And I think it's just like any other tool. Let's just take the example of, a hammer, right? Is a hammer good or bad? Well, a hammer is a tool. If I use that correctly and I use it for the purposes that it's intended, I can get a lot of utility out of that, and I can do a lot of projects and make my house better, and et cetera. If I don't use that correctly, I could end up with, bruises and bloodied and painful, right? If I don't use that hammer correctly. And I think that's the same thing with financial tools and lending. They're tools. They can make our life a lot better. For example, I might say, I want to buy a vehicle. Well, if I'm going to limit my vehicle spending to what I have on hand in savings, now that's a viable strategy, right? But I'm limiting myself to what I have available, or I can borrow and I can get the best vehicle that I can, and be able to put that on time and spread that out. That's a financial strategy. Yeah. Now, if I just say, hey, I'm going to buy $200,000 cars because I can finance those. Well, that's probably using that tool not wisely. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
It's understanding what, again, going back and understanding what my budget is, what my income is, and what I can afford. So that's really what I think the best advice is understanding that credit cards, loans, mortgages, they're all tools that can help make our financial life better if they're used wisely. When they're used incorrectly, they can cause a lot of pain and get us in a lot of trouble too. So it's always just being wise about it.